The storage unit smelled like rust and abandonment. Chen stood in the doorway, holding her daughter's hand, staring at the single item her great-grandmother had left her, a trunk covered in 60 years of dust. She was 32 years old, living out her car with her 7-year-old daughter Lily, and she'd driven 4 hours on their last tank of gas to claim an inheritance that was probably worthless. The storage facility manager had been clear. 3 months of unpaid fees, and whatever was inside would be auctioned off. Sarah had scraped together $200, money that should have bought groceries, to keep the unit for 1 more month, long enough to see if there was anything inside worth selling. "Mama, it's pretty," Lily whispered, reaching toward the trunk. It was pretty in a faded way. The leather was cracked and water-stained, but Sarah could still make out ornate brass corners and a hand-tool pattern across the lid. Flowers, maybe, or vines. The kind of craftsmanship nobody bothered with anymore. A heavy padlock hung from the latch, crusted with rust. "Don't touch it yet, baby," Sarah said, pulling Lily back gently. "We don't know if it's safe. Before we continue, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story is touching you already, make sure you're subscribed. I've got something extra special saved for tomorrow." Sarah knelt in front of the trunk, her knees protesting against the concrete floor. She'd been sleeping in the driver's seat of their Honda Civic for 2 months now, ever since the eviction. Her back ached constantly, her shoulders were tight knots of stress, and she couldn't remember the last time she'd slept more than 3 hours straight. Lily slept better, curled up in the back seat with the blankets Sarah had salvaged from their apartment. That was all that mattered. Keep Lily safe. Keep Lily fed. Keep moving forward, even when forward felt impossible. The padlock was old, the kind with a keyhole instead of a combination dial. Sarah pulled out the envelope the estate lawyer had given her 3 weeks ago. Inside was a single key, tarnished brass, and a handwritten note on yellow paper. "For Sarah Chen, great-granddaughter of Maid Chen. What's inside belonged to her alone. It belongs to you now. Use it wisely. Attorney Thomas Brennan, estate of Maid Chen, deceased March 2024. Sarah's great-grandmother had died at 98 in a nursing home in Asheville, North Carolina. Sarah had never met her, had barely known she existed until the lawyer's letter arrived at the homeless shelter where they'd been staying. Her own mother had cut ties with that side of the family decades ago, something about old grudges and shame Sarah had never fully understood. Her mother had died when Sarah was 19, taking those family secrets with her. And now, 14 years later, Sarah was homeless with a daughter to raise, and a dead woman she'd never known had left her a locked trunk in a storage unit. The key slid into the padlock with surprising ease. Sarah turned it, heard the mechanism click, and the lock fell open in her hand. She looked at Lily. "Ready?" Lily nodded, her dark eyes wide with the kind of hope only children could maintain even in the worst circumstances. "Maybe there's treasure." "Maybe," Sarah said, though she expected old clothes and moth-eaten quilts. "Let's see." She lifted the lid. The hinges creaked, protesting against decades of stillness. The smell that escaped was dry and papery, like old books left in an attic. Inside, wrapped in layers of yellow tissue paper, was a collection of items that made no immediate sense. On top, a stack of letters tied with a faded red ribbon. Beneath that, a wooden box about the size of a shoebox. Beside it, something flat and rectangular wrapped in oilcloth. And at the bottom, taking up most of the trunk space, bundles of what looked like old newspapers and documents. Sarah carefully lifted out the letters. The envelopes were addressed in careful script to Maid Chen, General Delivery, Blowing Rock, North Carolina. The return address read simply, M.H. Roan Mountain. The postmarks dated from 1930 to 1935. "What are they, Mama?" Lily leaned in, careful not to touch. Letters, very old letters. Sarah set them aside gently and reached for the wooden box. It was heavy, solid walnut, with brass hinges that matched the trunk's hardware. No lock, just a simple latch. She opened it. Inside, nestled in rotting velvet, were rocks. Sarah's heart sank. Not jewels, not anything valuable. Just rocks, rough, uncut stones in shades of gray and brown and dull green. Some were no bigger than marbles. Others filled her palm. She picked one up. It was surprisingly heavy for its size, and when she turned in the dim light filtering through the storage unit's high window, she thought she saw a glint of something metallic running through it. Pretty rocks, Lily said diplomatically. Sarah set the stone back carefully and reached for the oilcloth-wrapped package. It was heavier than it looked, rigid beneath the protective covering. She unwrapped it slowly. A frame. Behind cracked glass was a photograph, sepia tone and fading, showing a young Asian woman standing in front of a rough mountain cabin. She wore practical clothing, work pants, a heavy jacket, sturdy boots, and held a pickaxe over one shoulder. Her expression was serious, almost defiant, staring directly at the camera. On the back of the frame, written in the same careful script as the letters, Maid, Chen, Roan Mountain, North Carolina, 1932. What I found, I earned. What I earned, I protect. Sarah stared at the photograph. This was her great-grandmother, a woman she'd never known. A woman who'd apparently lived alone in the mountains, working a claim with a pickaxe in an era when Asian women in Appalachia must have faced unimaginable prejudice. She looks strong, Lily observed. She does, Sarah agreed. She really does. She set the photograph aside and began carefully removing the bundles of papers from the trunk's bottom. Most were newspapers, the Watauga Democrat and the Johnson City Press, dating from 1930 through 1945. She set those aside for later examination. Beneath the newspapers were documents. Legal papers, yellowed and brittle. Sarah unfolded the first one carefully. A mining claim, filed in 1931 with the Bureau of Land Management in the name of Maid Chen. The claim covered 40 acres on the eastern slope of Roan Mountain, Tennessee-North Carolina border. The second document was a deed, property transfer dated 1933, for a parcel of land adjacent to the mining claim, purchased from Elias Holt for $100. The third was a survey map, hand-drawn and annotated in precise detail. It showed the boundaries of both the mining claim and the purchased property, with specific geographic markers, creek beds, ridge lines, rock formations. And across the map, written in red ink, were notations that made Sarah's breath catch. Main vein, an E quadrant, 400-foot elevation. Secondary deposits, creek drainage, spring melt exposure. Assay results, 65% concentrated, or rare earth elements confirmed. Sarah's hand started shaking. She didn't know much about geology or mining, but she knew rare earth elements were valuable, incredibly valuable, the kind of materials used in electronics, renewable energy, military applications. She kept reading. More maps, more surveys, all meticulously documented. Her great-grandmother hadn't just been working a casual claim. She'd been operating a serious mining operation, complete with professional assays and geological surveys. At the very bottom of the trunk, Sarah found a leather journal. The cover was cracked but intact, and when she opened it, Maid Chen's handwriting filled page after page. January 15th, 1931. Filed my claim today. The men at the land office laughed when I walked in. An Oriental woman wanted to stake a mining claim? They thought it was a joke. But I had cash, and cash speaks louder than their contempt. The claim is mine. The land is mine. What I find there will be mine. Sarah flipped forward, scanning entries. March 3rd, 1931. Found the first deposits today. Exactly where the old prospector said they'd be. His map was accurate. The ore is there, maybe 200 feet below the ridge line. I'll need equipment, need money, need time, but it's there. July 19th, 1932. The assayer from Knoxville confirmed it. Rare earth elements, neodymium, dysprosium, cerium. He said it's one of the richest deposits he's ever tested. He asked if I wanted to sell. I told him no. This is mine. I won't give it to men who would pay me pennies for what's worth fortunes. October 30th, 1933. The Holt family is trying to force me off the land. They claim I tricked Elias into selling. They've hired lawyers. They've threatened violence. I've hired a lawyer of my own, a good one from Asheville, Who doesn't care that I'm Chinese? He cares that I'm right. The deed is legal. The claim is legal. They can't touch me. Sarah read faster, her heart pounding. Her great-grandmother had discovered valuable mineral deposits, had fought to protect her claim, and had apparently succeeded. But then what? Why had Sarah never heard about this? Why had the family never benefited from what should have been a fortune? She flipped to the final entries in the journal. December 4th, 1935. They won, but not in the way they think. The courts ruled in my favor. The land is mine. The claim is mine. But I can't work it anymore. The Holts have poisoned every supplier against me. No one will sell me equipment. No one will work for me. The sheriff looks the other way when they threaten me. I'm 60 miles from the nearest town that would serve someone who looks like me. I can't fight them all. So I'm leaving, taking what I can carry and disappearing. They think they've won the land. Let them have the land. They'll never find what's underneath it. I've hidden the proof, hidden the maps, hidden everything that matters. And someday, when the time is right, someone from my family will come back. Someone stronger. Someone who can finish what I started. The trunk holds everything. The evidence, the surveys, the truth. Guard it well. The journal ended there. No more entries. Just blank pages and the weight of 89 years of silence. Sarah sat back on her heels, stunned. Her great-grandmother had discovered a fortune in rare earth minerals, had been forced off her land by racism and intimidation, and had hidden the evidence rather than let her enemies profit from it. And now, nearly 90 years later, that evidence sat in Sarah's lap. "Mama?" Lily's voice was small. "Are you crying?" Sarah wiped her eyes. She hadn't realized. "I'm okay, baby. These are important. Very important." Important how? How did she explain this to a 7-year-old? How did she explain that the rocks in the wooden box might represent their way out of homelessness? That the maps and documents might be worth millions? That her great-grandmother, a woman she'd never met, might have just saved their lives? "Your great-great-grandmother was very brave," Sarah said carefully. "She found something valuable, and bad people tried to take it from her. So she hid it and kept it safe for us. For family. Like treasure?" Lily's eyes lit up. "Exactly like treasure." Sarah looked down at the documents spread across the storage unit floor. Mining claims, deeds, survey maps, assay results, a journal documenting everything. If this was real, if the deposits were still there, if the land could still be claimed, this could change everything. No more sleeping in the car. No more skipping meals so Lily could eat. No more fear of what happened when the Civic finally broke down, or when winter came and they had nowhere warm to sleep. But it could also be nothing. The land might have been sold decades ago. The minerals might have been extracted. The claims might have expired. Everything her great-grandmother had hidden might be worthless now, except as historical curiosities. Sarah needed to know, needed to find out if this was real, or just the desperate hope of a woman who'd run out of options. She started gathering the documents carefully, organizing them back into the trunk. The letters she set aside, those she'd read tonight, when Lily was asleep. The journal she kept out as well. But everything else, the maps, the deeds, the newspaper clippings, went back into the trunk for safekeeping. "What do we do now?" Lily asked. Sarah looked at her daughter, 7 years old, too thin, wearing clothes from the donation bin at the church shelter, hair that needed cutting, eyes that had seen too much fear and uncertainty for someone so young. "Now," Sarah said, "we go to the library. We're going to do some research." The public library in Boone, North Carolina, stayed open until 8 on weekdays. Sarah pulled into the parking lot at 4:30, and she and Lily went straight to the computer stations. Sarah hadn't been able to use a computer regularly since losing their apartment. Everything was on her dying phone now, with its cracked screen and dwindling data plan. But libraries were free, and the librarian at the desk barely glanced at them as they signed in. Sarah opened a browser and started searching. Roan Mountain mining claims. Rare earth elements, North Carolina. Land ownership records, Tennessee-North Carolina border. The results were overwhelming. Hundreds of articles about rare earth mining. about Chinese immigrants in Appalachia, about historical land claims and modern development. She narrowed the search. Maid, Chen, Mountain. Nothing. Not a single result. She tried different combinations. Chinese miners, North Carolina, 1930s. Mining claims, Watauga County. Rare earth deposits, Roan Mountain. Finally, buried in a digitized newspaper archive, she found something. A brief article from the Johnson City Press, dated April 1934. Local woman wins land dispute. Maid Chun, a Chinese immigrant residing near Roan Mountain, was awarded full ownership of disputed property following a lengthy court battle with the Holt family. The Holts claimed Miss Chun had fraudulently obtained a deed to 40 acres of mountain land. Circuit Judge Harold Weathers ruled in favor of Miss Chun, citing legitimate purchase documents and proper filing with county authorities. The Holts declined to comment. So it was real. Her great-grandmother had fought and won a legal battle for the land. Sarah searched for more recent information. Roan Mountain land ownership, current property records. This led her to the county assessor's website. She entered the parcel numbers from her great-grandmother's deed and waited while the database loaded. The result made her heart sink. Property status: tax sale 1943. Current owner: Holt Family Trust. The land had been sold for unpaid taxes in 1943, 8 years after her great-grandmother had left. The Holts had gotten it after all. Sarah sat back, feeling her hope crumble. Of course, Maid had abandoned the property, had stopped paying taxes, had disappeared, and the Holts had simply waited and claimed it legally when the county auctioned it off. 80 years later, they probably didn't even remember why they'd wanted it. Probably used it for timber or hunting, never knowing what was underneath. "Mama, I'm hungry," Lily whispered. Sarah checked her phone. 6:30. She had $4 in change in her pocket, enough for one meal from McDonald's dollar menu. "Okay, baby, let's," she stopped. "Wait, if the Holts didn't know about the mineral deposits, if they'd never found Maylin surveys and maps, then the rare earth elements were still there, undiscovered, unexploited. And if Sarah could prove the deposits existed, prove their value, then maybe, just maybe, there was a legal path to reclaiming them. Mining rights could be separate from land ownership. Her great-grandmother's original mining claim might still be valid under federal law. The Bureau of Land Management had different rules in county tax sales. Sarah started searching again, this time for mining law attorneys, rare earth mineral rights, and historical claim validation. Lily leaned against her shoulder, patient but tired. Sarah wrapped an arm around her daughter and kept reading. 2 hours later, armed with printouts and notes, Sarah finally shut down the computer. She had a plan. It was complicated and probably impossible, but it was a plan. Tomorrow, she would drive to the county courthouse and pull the full land records. She would verify every detail of her great-grandmother's claim. She would find out if mining rights could be separated from surface rights. She would figure out if there was any legal pathway to reclaiming what Maid Chen had found 90 years ago. And then, if everything checked out, she would do what her great-grandmother couldn't. She would fight back. The Watauga County Courthouse was a brick building that looked like it had been standing since before her great-grandmother's time. Sarah pushed the heavy doors with Lily's hand in hers, their footsteps echoing on marble floors worn smooth by a century of foot traffic. The clerk at the land records office looked up from her computer with the expression of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. She was maybe 60, with reading glasses on a chain and a nameplate that read Barbara Hastings. "Help you?" Barbara asked. Sarah pulled out the deed from her backpack. She'd been carrying all the important documents with her, afraid to leave them in the car. "I need to pull complete records for this property. Everything from 1930 to present." Barbara took the deed and examined it with narrowed eyes. "This is old. You family. Great-granddaughter of the original owner. Barbara typed something into her computer. Maylin Chun. I'll be damned. Haven't seen that name in years." Sarah's pulse quickened. "You know about her?" "Know of her. My grandmother used to talk about the Chinese woman who worked a claim up on Roan Mountain. Said she was tougher than most of the men around here. Barbara looked up over her glasses. Said the Holts ran her off, though nobody could prove it. They got the land after she left. Tax sale. That's usually how it went back then. Barbara stood. Let me pull the full file. This'll take a few minutes. There's a children's area down the hall, if your daughter wants to wait there. Sarah looked at Lily, who was already eyeing the hallway with interest. Go ahead, baby. Stay where I can see you. Lily scampered off toward the sound of other children's voices. Sarah watched her go, then turned back to the counter. Barbara returned 15 minutes later with a thick accordion folder. Everything we've got. Purchase records, tax records, claim filings, court documents from the 1934 case. You want copies? Yes, all of it. That's going to be expensive. 10 cents a page, and there's probably 300 pages here. $30. Sarah had $42 total. She needed gas, needed food, but she needed these records more. I'll take them. While Barbara fed documents through the copy machine, Sarah spread the originals across the counter and started reading. The 1934 court case was exactly as the newspaper had described. The Holts claiming fraud, May Lynn presenting legitimate purchase documents, the judge ruling in her favor. But there was something else. A motion filed by the Holts' attorney in 1935, after they'd lost the case. A petition to the county to investigate whether May Lynn's mining claim was properly filed with federal authorities. The claim had been filed correctly. The Bureau of Land Management had certified it, but the Holts had tried every angle to invalidate it. Sarah flipped to the tax records. Her great-grandmother had paid property taxes faithfully through 1935. Then nothing. 1936, 1937, 1938, all marked delinquent. By 1943, the property had been seized and auctioned, purchased by Holt Family Trust for $200, less than half what May Lynn had originally paid for it. Sarah's jaw tightened. They'd waited her out, harassed her until she left, then bought the land for pennies when the county took it for unpaid taxes. Find what you need? Barbara asked, stacking copies. Maybe. Question. If someone had a federal mining claim that was filed correctly, but they lost the surface land in a tax sale, would the mining rights still be valid? Barbara paused. That's complicated. Federal mining claims operate under different law than surface ownership. If the claim was properly maintained, annual fees paid, annual assessment work done, then theoretically it could still be active even if the surface land changed hands. And if it wasn't maintained, then it would have lapsed, probably in the first few years after she left, if she stopped doing the required work. Sarah's hope deflated slightly. Of course, her great-grandmother hadn't been able to maintain the claim. She'd been driven off, had probably never come back to the mountain. But, Barbara continued, there have been court cases about abandoned claims being reinstated if the original claimant can prove they were prevented from maintaining them through no fault their own. Fraud, intimidation, systematic discrimination, those can be grounds for reinstatement. Sarah looked up sharply. Seriously? I'm not a lawyer, but I've seen it happen. Usually takes years of litigation, though, and you'd need proof. Real proof that she was forced off the land illegally. Sarah thought about the journal. May Lynn's detailed accounts of threats. Sabotage. Official indifference to harassment. Was that enough? She gathered her copies, $38, leaving her with $4 in change, and found Lily in the children's area, reading a picture book about mountains. Ready to go, baby? Can we come back tomorrow? They have good books here. Maybe. We'll see. They walked out into afternoon sunshine. Sarah's mind was racing. She needed a lawyer, needed someone who specialized in mining law and historical claims, needed someone who would work on contingency because she had no money to pay up front. She also needed to see the land itself, needed to verify that the mineral deposits her great-grandmother had documented were really there, or at least could still be proven. Back at the car, Sarah spread a map across the hood. Roan Mountain straddled the Tennessee-North Carolina border, about an hour's drive from where they were now. The specific parcel her great-grandmother had claimed was accessible by Forest Service roads. If she could get up there, take photographs, maybe collect some samples, that would be evidence. Not enough on its own. but combined with Mei Lin's surveys and says, it might be enough to convince a lawyer the case was worth taking. "Mama, where are we sleeping tonight?" Lily asked. Sarah looked at her daughter. They'd been sleeping in the Walmart parking lot near Boone for the past week, moving every few nights to avoid attention. It wasn't safe. It wasn't sustainable. But it was all they had. "I don't know yet, baby, but I'm working on it." Lily nodded, accepting this the way she'd learned to accept everything. Sarah hated that her daughter had become so good at accepting uncertainty. She made a decision. Tomorrow, they would drive to Roan Mountain. She'd use the last of their gas to get there, hike to the property if necessary, and see what remained of her great-grandmother's claim. And then she'd figure out what came next. The Forest Service Road was worse than Sarah had expected, rutted and washed out in places, barely wide enough for Civic. She drove slowly, wincing every time the undercarriage scraped against exposed rock. Lily sat in the back seat, looking out the window at the dense forest pressing in on both sides. It's pretty here. It was pretty and isolated. Sarah understood now why her great-grandmother had chosen this place. It was remote enough that a woman working alone could avoid unwanted attention, but also remote enough that help was far away when that attention turned threatening. According to the map, the property line started about 2 miles up this road, marked by a creek crossing. Sarah watched the odometer, counting tenths of miles. At 1.8 miles, the road became impassable. A washout had taken out a 20-foot section, leaving a gully too deep for the Civic to cross. Sarah parked and studied the map. They could walk from here, maybe half a mile to the creek, then another quarter mile up the ridge to where Mei Lin's surveys indicated the main deposit. "We're going hiking," she told Lily. "How far?" "Not too far, but we need to be careful. Stay close to me." Sarah packed water bottles, snacks, her phone for photographs, and the hand-drawn survey map in her backpack. She left the original documents locked in the trunk back at the storage unit, but she'd photographed everything. They started walking. The forest was thick with rhododendron and mountain laurel, just starting to bloom. The air smelled like pine and rich earth. Birds called from the canopy overhead. If Sarah hadn't been so worried about their situation, she might have enjoyed the hike. Lily seemed to. She pointed out flowers and interesting rocks, her small hand warm in Sarah's as they navigated the rough trail. 20 minutes in, they reached the creek. It was running high with spring melt, maybe 15 feet wide, and moving fast over smooth stones. Sarah checked the map. This was the boundary. Mei Lin's property started on the other side of this creek. There was no bridge, but upstream about 50 yards, Sarah spotted a fallen log spanning the water. She led Lily toward it, testing the log's stability before they crossed. On the far side, the forest changed subtly. The trees were older here, bigger. And Sarah noticed something else. Stone markers, weathered and covered in moss, but clearly placed by human hands. Boundary markers. Her great-grandmother had been thorough. They followed the markers uphill. Sarah checked her phone's GPS against the survey map. The grade steepened, and Lily started breathing hard. "Can we rest, Mama?" "Soon, baby." Just a little further. At the top of the ridge, the forest opened into a small clearing. And there, tucked against a rock outcropping, Sarah saw the remains of a structure. A cabin, or what was left of one. The roof had collapsed decades ago, but the stone foundation was intact, and 2 walls still stood, though they leaned precariously. This was where Mei Lin had lived. Had to be. Sarah approached slowly, almost reverently. Her great-grandmother had built this with her own hands, had lived here alone through mountain winters, had worked her claim from this base. Lily ran ahead, curious. "Mama, look, there's stuff inside." "Lily, be careful. The walls could fall." But Lily was already peering through a gap in the collapsed wall. Sarah hurried over and looked inside. The cabin's interior was filled with debris, rotted wood, rusted metal, years of accumulated leaves and animal nests. But against the back wall, protected by the rock outcropping, sat several items that had survived. A rusted pickaxe, a wooden crate, its slats mostly intact, and tucked in the corner, a metal box similar to the one in the trunk. Sarah's heart raced. She carefully climbed the gap in the wall, testing each step. The floor was dirt, at least no risk of falling through rotted boards. She reached the metal box and tried to lift it. Heavy, very heavy. The latch was rusted shut, but when Sarah pried at it with a rock, it gave way. She opened the box. Inside were more rocks. But these weren't like the samples in the trunk. These were raw or chunks of stone shot through with metallic veins that glinted even the dim light filtering through the collapsed roof. Dozens of them. Pounds and pounds of ore. Pretty, Lily said, reaching for one. Don't touch yet, baby. Let Mama check first. Sarah pulled out her phone and photographed everything. The cabin location, the ore samples, the tools. Then she selected several of the smaller rocks and carefully placed them in her backpack. Evidence. Proof that the deposits were real, that Mei Lin hadn't been imagining things. She was about to close the box when she noticed something else. Tucked beneath the ore samples was another oilcloth package, similar to the one that had held the photograph in the trunk. Sarah pulled it out and unwrapped it carefully. Another map, but this one was different from the survey maps in the trunk. This one showed the full extent of Mei Lin's exploration. Not just the 40 acres she claimed, but the surrounding area for miles in every direction. And across the map, marked in red ink, were notations that made Sarah's breath catch. Primary deposit, claimed property. Secondary deposits, Holt land, unclaimed. Tertiary deposits, National Forest, unclaimed. Her great-grandmother hadn't just found rare earth elements on her own 40 acres. She'd found them across hundreds of acres, including land the Holts now owned and land that was now part of the National Forest. If this map was accurate, the Holts had been sitting on a fortune for 80 years without knowing it. And if Sarah could prove the deposits extended beyond the original 40 acres, that changed everything. Mining rights on federal land operated under completely different rules than private property. Sarah photographed the map from every angle, making sure every notation was clearly visible. Then she rewrapped it carefully and added it to her backpack. Mama, I found something. Sarah turned to see Lily kneeling by the wooden crate, pulling out what looked like a rolled bundle of papers. Lily, careful. But Lily had already unrolled them. More documents. Sarah hurried over and took them gently. Assay reports. Professional geological surveys. All dated 1932 to 1935. All confirming high concentrations of rare earth elements across multiple test sites. And at the bottom of the stack, a letter on official letterhead. Knoxville Geological Survey. April 15, 1935. Dear Miss Chen, our analysis of the samples you provided confirms our preliminary findings. The rare earth element concentrations in your claim area are among the highest we have ever documented in the Appalachian region. Conservative estimates suggest recoverable reserves valued at $2 to $4 million at current market prices. We strongly recommend you contact mining development firms immediately. A deposit of this magnitude would be of significant commercial interest. Respectfully, Dr. Harold Chen, no relation, Chief Geologist. Sarah read it twice. $2 to $4 million in 1935 money. She tried to calculate what that would be worth today. Tens of millions, probably, maybe more, given how much more valuable rare earth elements had become with modern technology. Her great-grandmother had been sitting on a fortune, had known it, and had been forced to walk away rather than let the people who'd driven her off profit from it. Sarah carefully folded the letter and added it to her backpack. She had everything she needed now. Proof of the deposits. Proof of their value. Proof that Mei Lin had been legally entitled to the claim. Now she just needed to find a lawyer brave enough to go after the Holt family. Sarah was so focused on organizing the documents that she didn't hear the footsteps until they were close. You're trespassing. She spun around. A man stood at the edge of the clearing, maybe 50 years old, wearing expensive hiking gear and carrying a walking stick that looked more ornamental than functional. Behind him stood two younger men, both larger, both watching Sarah with expressions that made her skin crawl. This is private property, the first man continued. Holt family land. You need to leave. Sarah's mind raced. She stepped in front of Lily, protectively. I'm just hiking. I didn't realize this was private. There are signs. Multiple signs. He gestured down the ridge. You passed at least 3 of them. Sarah hadn't seen any signs, but she didn't argue. We'll leave. Sorry for confusion. What's in the backpack? Just our water and snacks. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I think you're lying. I think you found something in that old cabin. Something that doesn't belong to you. One of the younger men moved to block the path down the ridge. The other circled around to Sarah's left. Lily pressed against Sarah's leg, silent but trembling. I said we'll leave, Sarah repeated, keeping her voice steady despite the fear rising in her throat. We don't want any trouble. Little late for that. The older man stepped closer. My name is Robert Holt. My family has owned this land for 80 years, and I know exactly what's buried under it. Been waiting for someone come looking, ever since we found out Maid Chen had a living descendant. Sarah's blood ran cold. How did you? Estate notification is public record. When your great-grandmother died, the state had to search for heirs. We've been monitoring, waiting to see if anyone would claim her trunk. He gestured to her backpack. I'm guessing you found maps. Surveys, maybe, or samples. Am I right? Sarah didn't answer. Here's what's going to happen, Robert continued. You're going to give me that backpack. Then you're going to forget you were ever here. Forget about your great-grandmother's claim. Forget about whatever you think you're entitled to. Because if you don't, things are going to get very difficult for you and your daughter. He let that threat hang in the air. Sarah looked at the 2 younger men. Both were armed. She could see the outlines of holsters under their jackets. She was alone with a 7-year-old, miles from help. She had 2 choices. Give them the backpack and walk away with nothing, or fight and risk both their lives. Mama? Lily's voice was tiny. Sarah made her decision. She slipped the backpack off her shoulders and held it out. Take it. Just let us go. Robert Holt smiled. Smart woman. Smarter than your great-grandmother, at least. One of the younger men stepped forward to take the backpack. Sarah let him, watched him hand it to Robert, watched Robert open it, and examine the contents with satisfaction. Perfect. Maps, samples, assay reports, everything we needed to confirm the deposits. He looked at Sarah. You did us a favor. Actually, we've been looking for these for years. Mei Lin hid them well. You're welcome, Sarah said flatly. Can we go now? One more thing. Robert pulled out his phone. I need you to sign something. A legal document stating you've investigated your great-grandmother's claim and found nothing of value. That you relinquish all rights to any property or mineral claims associated with Maid Chen. I'm not signing anything. Then you're not leaving. My land, my rules. We can stay here all night if we have to. Sarah looked at Lily, who was crying silently now, terrified. She thought about the civic park 2 miles away, their last $4 in her pocket. Nowhere to go and no one to call for help. She thought about her great-grandmother, driven off the same land by threats and intimidation, forced to hide everything she'd worked for rather than surrender to the Holts. And she thought about what Mei Lin had written in her journal. Someone stronger. Someone who can finish what I started. Sarah wasn't stronger, wasn't braver, wasn't anything special. She was just a desperate homeless woman trying to protect her daughter. But maybe that was enough. I'll sign, she said quietly. Just let us go. Robert pulled up a document on his phone and turned it toward her. Read it and sign at the bottom. Sarah pretended to read, her mind working frantically. She needed to buy time, needed to think. And then she heard it, a vehicle engine, distant but growing closer. Robert heard it too. He frowned. Who else knows you're here? Nobody, Sarah said honestly. The engine grew louder. Then voices calling out. Hello? Anyone up here? This is National Forest Service. Robert's expression darkened. He grabbed Sarah's arm hard enough to bruise. If you say one word. Let go of me, Sarah said loudly. Let go of my arm right now. The voices stopped. Then closer, urgent. Ma'am, are you all right? 2 forest rangers appeared at the edge of the clearing, both in uniform, both armed. A woman in her 40s and a younger man, both looking alert and concerned. "We're fine," Robert called out, releasing Sarah's arm but staying close. "Just had a misunderstanding about property boundaries. We're working it out." The female ranger looked at Sarah. "Ma'am, do you need assistance?" Sarah met her eyes and made a split-second decision. "Yes, these men are threatening me and my daughter. They took my backpack. They won't let us leave." Robert's face flushed red. "That's a lie. This woman was trespassing on my family's private property. I was just—" "Sir, step away from her." The ranger's hand moved to her weapon. "Now!" The two younger men shifted, and the male ranger immediately drew his gun. "Don't!" Hands where I can see them. Everything went very still. Robert Holt stared at Sarah with pure hatred. "You have no idea what you've just done." "Actually," Sarah said, "I think I do." The ranger station was small and cluttered, smelling of coffee and pine. Sarah sat across from Ranger Angela Morrison, while Lily colored with markers at a side table, headphones on, watching cartoons on the ranger's tablet. "Let me make sure I understand," Angela said, reviewing her notes. "You're the great-granddaughter of Maid Chen, who held a mining claim on that property in the 1930s. You inherited documents proving she discovered valuable mineral deposits. You went up to the old cabin site to verify the claim, and a Holt showed up, threatened you, and took your backpack with all the evidence." "That's exactly what happened," Sarah confirmed. Angela set down her pen. "Here's the problem. The Holts own that land legally, have owned it since 1943. Technically, you were trespassing." Sarah's heart sank. "So they can just take everything? Threaten us and face no consequences." "I didn't say that." Angela leaned forward. "They can't threaten you or your daughter. That's assault. And they definitely can't detain you against your will. I've filed a report, and the sheriff's department will investigate. But they'll get away with it. Men like that always do." Angela was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Can I tell you something off the record?" Sarah nodded. "The Holt family has been trying to develop that land for years. They've applied for mining permits 3 times in the last decade. Each time, the Forest Service has denied them because the deposits extend onto federal land, and they've never been able to prove the full extent of the mineral concentrations. They needed better geological data." Sarah understood immediately. "The maps I had, the Say reports. That's what they needed. Probably, and now they have them." Angela paused. "Unless you have copies." Sarah felt a small spark of hope. "I photographed everything before I put it in my backpack. It's all on my phone." Angela smiled. "Then they didn't take your evidence. They took paper. Paper you can replace." "But what good does that do? They still own the land." "Surface rights, yes. But mining rights? That's complicated." Angela pulled out a tablet and brought up a map. "Look, your great-grandmother's original 40 acres here, owned by the Holts, but the deposits extend here, here, and here." She pointed to areas marked as national forest, federal land, which means any mining operation would require federal permits, environmental impact statements, coordination with the Forest Service. So the Holts can't develop it alone. They'd need a partner with the geological data to prove the deposits exist on federal land. Someone with the original surveys and assays. Angela looked at Sarah meaningfully. "Someone like you." Sarah's mind raced. "You're saying I could use the evidence to block them?" "I'm saying you could use it to negotiate. The Holts have the land. You have the data. Neither of you can move forward without the other. They'll never negotiate with me. You saw how Robert Holt looked at me. Then you need leverage. You need to make them more afraid of what you can do than confident in what they have." Angela stood and walked to a filing cabinet. "And I might be able to help with that." She pulled out a thick folder. "The Holt's mining permit applications. Public record. I've reviewed every one. They're all incomplete because they can't prove the deposits extend onto federal land. But look at this. Their 3rd application, filed 2 years ago. They hired a consulting firm to do preliminary surveys." Angela laid out several pages. "The firm was called Meridian Geological. Small outfit out of Asheville. They did surface surveys, took some samples, submitted a report saying the deposits likely extended onto adjacent federal land, but they couldn't confirm without access to historical data. Historical data that my great-grandmother collected, Sarah said. Exactly. And look who owns Meridian Geological. Angela pointed to a business registration document. Sarah read the name and felt her stomach drop. Robert Holt. His company. So he's been looking for Mei Lin's surveys for years. That's why they were monitoring the estate notifications. They needed her data to prove what they already suspected. Sarah thought about Robert Holt's face when he'd opened her backpack, the satisfaction when he'd seen the maps and assays. So now he has everything. He can file a new permit application with the complete data. He can try, but it won't work. Why not? Angela smiled. Because those surveys were conducted by Mei Chen as part of her federally registered mining claim. The data belongs to that claim, not to whoever happens to own the surface land. If Robert uses that data in a permit application, you can challenge it, argue that he obtained it illegally. At minimum, it would tie up his application in court for years. Sarah felt hope rising. How do you know all this? I have a law degree, practice environmental law before I burned out and joined the Forest Service. Angela closed the folder. Here's what you need to do. First, get those photos off your phone and onto multiple secure backups, cloud storage, external drives, whatever. Make sure the evidence can't be destroyed. Okay. Second, find a lawyer, someone who specializes in mining law and isn't afraid of the Holts. I can give you some names. I don't have money for a lawyer. Some might work on contingency if the case is strong enough. In this case, if those deposits are as valuable as your great-grandmother's assays suggest, any lawyer would take it for a percentage of the settlement. Settlement. The Holts aren't going to want this in court. Too much risk, too much publicity. They'll negotiate. Sarah looked at Lily, still absorbed in her cartoons, oblivious to the conversation that might change their lives. What would a settlement look like? Depends on what you ask for. Money? They'll pay you to go away, probably 6 figures. A percentage of future mining revenue could be worth millions over time. Or, Angela paused, you could ask for something else. Like what? Like a stake in the mining operation itself. Partnership. They provide the land and capital. You provide the geological data and the legal right to use it. You become an owner, not just a payout. Sarah's head spun. I don't know anything about mining. You'd hire people who do. The point is, you have leverage. More than you realize. The Holts need what you have. Use that. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more incredible mountain stories like this one. Sarah left the ranger station with a list of lawyer names and a plan forming in her mind. But first, she needed to secure the evidence. She drove to a FedEx office in Boone and used her last $4 to print out every photograph from her phone, maps, surveys, assay reports, the letter from a Knoxville Geological Survey, everything. She made 3 copies of complete set. Then she borrowed a phone charger from the clerk and uploaded everything to 3 different cloud storage accounts she created using free email addresses. By the time she finished, it was dark outside. Lily was asleep in one of the waiting area chairs, curled up with her jacket as a blanket. Sarah looked at her daughter and felt something shift inside her. For 2 months, she'd been in survival mode, focused only on making it through each day, finding food, finding safe places to sleep, avoiding authorities who might take Lily away. But this was different. This wasn't just survival. This was fighting back. This was taking what her great-grandmother had worked for and making sure it counted for something. She gently woke Lily. Come on, baby. Let's go. Where are we sleeping tonight? Sarah checked her phone. She'd been so focused on the documents that she hadn't thought about where they'd spend the night. The Walmart parking lot where they'd been staying felt exposed now. If the Holts wanted to find her, that's where they'd look. She needed somewhere safer, somewhere off the grid. And then she remembered the storage unit. It was climate-controlled, secure, and she'd pay for another month. Nobody would think to look for them there. "We're going camping," she told Lily. "Indoor camping." Lily perked up. "Like a sleepover?" "Exactly like a sleepover." They drove to the storage facility. The night manager barely looked up as Sarah signed in. She parked the Civic near their unit, opened the door, and pulled out the sleeping bags they'd been using in the car. Inside the unit, surrounded by her great-grandmother's trunk and the few boxes of belongings they'd salvaged from the eviction, Sarah made a nest of blankets. It wasn't comfortable, but it was warm. And more importantly, it was safe. Lily fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from a long day. Sarah lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything Angela had said. She needed a lawyer, someone good, someone who wouldn't be intimidated by the Holt family's money and connections. She pulled out the list Angela had given her and started researching on her phone. Most of the names were big firms in Asheville or Charlotte, the kind of places that would take one look at her and dismiss her. But one name stood out: Julia Reese, solo practitioner, specializing in mining law and indigenous rights. Her website was simple, but her credentials were impressive. Harvard Law, 10 years with the Sierra Club Legal Defense Fund, now in private practice taking on cases that matter. Sarah checked the time. Almost midnight. Too late to call. But the website had an email contact form. Sarah opened it and started typing. "Ms. Reese, my name is Sarah Chen. I'm writing about a mining claim my great-grandmother filed in 1931 on Roan Mountain, North Carolina. She discovered valuable rare earth element deposits, but was forced off the land through intimidation and racism. The family that drove her off now owns the land and is trying to develop the minerals she found. I have complete documentation: surveys, essays, maps, journals. I have proof the deposits are worth millions, and I need help getting justice. I'm homeless with a 7-year-old daughter. I can't pay up front, but if you take cases on contingency, I think this one is worth your time. Please call me. 828-555-0147. Sarah Chun." She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Then she set an alarm for 6 a.m. and tried to sleep. Julia Reese called at 7:30 the next morning. "Ms. Chen, this is Julia Reese. I got your email. Tell me everything." Sarah told her. All of it. May Lynn's story, the trunk, the documents, the confrontation with the Holts, everything Angela had explained about leverage and negotiation. Julia listened without interrupting. When Sarah finished, there was a long pause. "Ms. Chun, this is one of the most extraordinary cases I've ever heard. If your documentation is as complete as you say, you're sitting on a potential landmark case. Historical mining rights, racial discrimination, mineral claim validation. This touches on multiple areas of law. Will you take it? I need to see the evidence first. Can you come to Asheville? My office is downtown. I don't have gas money." Another pause. "Stay where you are. I'll come to you." "Where you exactly?" Sarah gave her the address of the storage facility. "I'll be there in 2 hours." Julia Reese arrived exactly on time, driving a sensible Subaru and wearing jeans and a fleece jacket. Not what Sarah had expected from a Harvard-educated lawyer. She was maybe 40, with graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and sharp eyes that assessed Sarah and Lily in one glance. "You weren't kidding about the homeless part," she said, looking at the storage unit. "No." "Okay, show me what you have." Sarah opened the trunk and laid out everything. The original documents, the printed photographs, her phone with the cloud storage accounts. Julia examined each item methodically, taking her own photographs, making notes on a legal pad. After an hour, she sat back. "This is real. All of it. Your great-grandmother documented everything perfectly. The claim is legitimate. The surveys are professional grade, and the assay results are consistent with modern geological data about that region. So we have a case? We have an exceptional case. The question is what you want from it. I want the Holts to pay for what they did, to May Lynn and to us. Revenge is expensive and uncertain. You'd be better off with compensation. How much?" Julia pulled up a calculator on her phone. "Conservative estimate? If those deposits are as rich as the 1935 assays suggest, and if modern extraction methods could recover 70 to 80% of the rare earth elements, you're looking at mineral value in the $50 to $100 million range. Sarah's vision blurred. Million? The Holts own the surface land, which complicates things. But your great-grandmother's mining claim data is essential to proving the deposits exist and can be developed. Without that data, they can't get federal permits. So we have leverage. What kind of settlement could we get? Depends on how we play it. Cash payout? I could probably get you $5 to $10 million to go away quietly. Revenue sharing? Maybe 15 to 20% of net mining proceeds over the life of the operation. Or, Julia looked at Sarah carefully, we could go for the nuclear option. What's that? We file a claim that the original mining rights are still valid under federal law. Argue that your great-grandmother's forced abandonment was a result of racial discrimination and intimidation, which invalidates the tax sale of the property. Ask a federal court to reinstate the mining claim in your name. Can we do that? It's never been done successfully in a case this old, but it's never been tried with documentation this complete. You have Mei Lin's journal describing the threats. You have evidence of systematic discrimination against Chinese miners in that era. You have proof she properly filed and maintained the claim until she was forced to flee. What happens if we win? You own the mining rights, not the surface land. The Holts keep that, but any minerals extracted would belong to you. You lease access to the surface in exchange for royalties. Hire a mining company to do the extraction and collect the revenue. And if we lose, we fall back to settlement negotiations. But the threat of that nuclear option gives us enormous leverage. The Holts won't want this in federal court. Too much risk, too much attention. They'll settle to make it go away. Sarah thought about Mei Lin Chen, driven from her land, forced to hide everything she'd worked for, dying at 98 without ever seeing justice. I want the nuclear option, she said. I want to fight. Julia smiled. Good, because that's what I do best. Over the next 2 weeks, Julia Reese moved faster than Sarah thought possible. She filed preliminary motions in federal court, served notice to the Holt family, and leaked the story to a reporter at the Asheville Citizen-Times. The article ran on front page. Homeless woman fights mining magnates over great-grandmother's 1930s claim. The story went viral. Suddenly, Sarah's phone was ringing constantly. Other lawyers offering to help. Advocacy groups for Asian American rights. Environmental organizations interested in the rare earth elements. News outlets wanting interviews. Julia handled all of it, keeping Sarah and Lily protected while building their case in the background. And then, exactly 2 weeks after the article ran, Robert Holt's lawyers called requesting a meeting. Julia rented a conference room at a hotel in Asheville. Sarah sat at one end of the long table, Julia beside her. At the other end sat Robert Holt, two of his lawyers, and an older woman Julia identified as Martha Holt, the family matriarch. Martha spoke first. Ms. Chen, I want to start by apologizing for my nephew's behavior on the mountain. Threatening you and your daughter was unacceptable. Robert looked furious, but stayed silent. Your apology doesn't change what happened, Sarah said quietly. No, it doesn't, but perhaps we can find a resolution that benefits everyone. Julia leaned forward. What are you proposing? One of the Holt lawyers slid a document across the table. A settlement, $8 million cash payment to Ms. Chen in exchange for all rights to geological data, and a signed agreement not to pursue any further claims related to property. Sarah's breath caught. $8 million. More money than she'd ever imagined having. Julia didn't even look at the document. Countered. 25% equity stake in the mining operation, with Ms. Chen as a named partner. She retains ownership of all geological data, which is licensed to the partnership for the duration of the mining operation, plus a seat on the board of directors. Robert Holt exploded. Absolutely not. We're not giving her. Martha held up a hand, silencing him. Why would we agree to that? Because otherwise we go to federal court. And I'll make sure every news outlet in the country knows how your family drove a Chinese immigrant woman off her legally held claim in 1935. How you waited until she was forced to abandon the land for unpaid taxes, then bought it for pennies. How you've been sitting on a fortune for 80 years while her descendant lived in her car. That's defamation, one of the Holt lawyers said. It's documented fact. I have Mei Chen's journal. I have witness statements from people who remember what happened. I have records of similar discrimination cases in that era. You want to fight this in court? Be my guest. But you'll lose in the court of public opinion even if you win legally. Martha Holt stared at Julia for a long moment, then at Sarah. You really think you can win this fight? Sarah thought about Mei Lin, alone on that mountain, refusing to surrender what she'd earned. My great-grandmother survived things you can't imagine. She protected what she found for 90 years, waiting for someone strong enough to claim it. I'm not going to waste that by taking your payoff and walking away. So it's not about the money. It's about finishing what she started. It's about making sure that when my daughter is grown, she knows that women like us don't give up. We fight. Martha was quiet. Then she turned to her lawyers. Give us the room. The lawyers looked confused, but left. Robert started protest, but Martha silenced him with a look. He followed the lawyers out, slamming the door. Martha turned back to Sarah and Julia. Here's the truth. That land has been in my family for 4 generations. We tried to develop it 3 times and failed every time because we couldn't prove the deposits existed. My husband died thinking it was worthless. My son wasted a fortune on surveys that went nowhere. She paused. And now you show up with everything we needed, everything we've been looking for, and you want to be partners. Equal partners, Julia corrected. 25% equity stake for Ms. Chen. The Holts retained 75% in exchange for the land and development capital. If we agree to this, what's to stop you from taking the data and developing it with someone else? The data stays in the partnership. Neither party can use it without the other's consent. It's structured, so we need each other. Martha considered this. What about management? Who runs the operation? The Holts run day-to-day operations. Ms. Chen has board oversight and veto power on major decisions, environmental impact, community consultation, safety protocols. And her stake is inheritable? Goes to her daughter if something happens? Yes. Martha nodded slowly. 20% equity stake. The Holts retain 80%. Ms. Chen gets a board seat and veto power as described, and she gets a $2 million upfront payment against future royalties. Julia looked at Sarah. Sarah nodded. Deal, Julia said. The contracts took another month to finalize. Julia negotiated every clause, making sure Sarah's interests were protected. When the papers were finally ready, they met again at the same hotel conference room. This time, Martha Holt was alone. She slid the contracts across the table to Sarah. Before you sign, I want to say something. Sarah waited. I've spent the last month researching what happened to your great-grandmother. Not the legal stuff, the human story. I found newspaper articles, old letters, people who remembered her. Martha's voice softened. She was extraordinary. Built a life in these mountains when everything was against her. And my family, my grandfather, my uncles, they destroyed that because they couldn't stand seeing a Chinese woman succeed where they failed. She paused. I can't fix what they did, but I can make sure it doesn't happen again. This partnership, it's not charity. You've earned it. Your great-grandmother earned it. And I hope that working together, we can build something she'd be proud of. Sarah felt tears sting her eyes. Thank you. She signed the contracts. Julia witnessed. And just like that, Sarah Chen stopped being homeless. The $2 million upfront payment hit her bank account 3 days later. Sarah spent the first day just staring at the number on her phone, not quite believing it was real. The second day, she and Lily went to Target. They bought clothes that fit, shoes that didn't have holes. A stuffed animal Lily had been eyeing for months, but Sarah had never been able to afford. The third day, Sarah rented an apartment, 2 bedrooms furnished in a safe neighborhood near Lily's new school. It wasn't fancy, but it had heat and running water and doors that locked, and Lily had her own room for the first time in her life. They moved in with 2 suitcases of belongings and Mei Lin's trunk. Sarah set the trunk in her bedroom, next to the window where morning light would catch it. Inside, she placed a photograph of her great-grandmother, stern, defiant, holding that pickaxe like a weapon and a promise. Every morning, Sarah looked at that photograph and thought about Mei Lin Chen, a woman who'd fought impossible odds, who'd lost everything but never surrendered, who'd hidden what she'd found and waited for 90 years for someone to finish what she'd started. Sarah had done that, with Julia's help, with Angela's guidance, with her own desperate courage. She'd taken what Mei Lin had protected and turned it into justice. 6 months later, Sarah stood on the ridge above her great-grandmother's old cabin site. Construction equipment rumbled in the valley below, the mining operation beginning its careful, environmentally conscious extraction of the rare earth elements Mei Lin had discovered nearly a century ago. Lily stood beside her, older now, starting to understand the magnitude of what had happened. "Mama, did great-great-grandma really work that pickaxe all by herself?" "She did. Every day for years." Was she scared? Sarah thought about Mei Lin, alone on this mountain, facing threats and discrimination, refusing to give up. Probably, but she did it anyway. Like you did, when those men tried to take your backpack. Like I did. They stood quietly, watching the careful work below. The Hope family had hired the best environmental engineers, installed state-of-the-art pollution controls, consulted with local communities about every phase of development. Martha Holt had been true to her word. This was being done right. And Sarah's 20% stake meant that every ton of rare earth elements extracted put money into a trust fund for Lily's education, for Sarah's future, for the generations that would come after them. Mei Lin's fortune finally claimed. "Mama?" Lily tugged at her hand. "Can we put flowers on her marker?" Sarah had commissioned a memorial stone, placed at the cabin site. Simple granite, carved with Mei Lin's name and dates, and beneath them, she found what others couldn't. She protected what others wouldn't. She endured. They walked down to the marker together. Sarah placed fresh mountain laurel at its base. The same flowers had been blooming when Mei Lin first worked this claim. "Thank you," Sarah whispered to the stone, to the mountain, to the memory of a woman she'd never met but who'd saved her life anyway. "We finished it. We finished what you started." The wind moved through the trees, carrying the smell of pine and earth, and the distant sound of machinery turning stone into treasure. And Sarah Chen, no longer homeless, no longer desperate, stood with her daughter on the mountain that had belonged to her great-grandmother and thought, this is what inheritance really means. Not just money or land or minerals, but the courage to fight for what's yours. The strength to stand up when everything's against you. The faith that somewhere, someday, someone will finish what you had to leave undone. Mei Lin had given her all of that, and Sarah would make sure Lily understood it, carried it forward, passed it on. The mountain held its secrets for 90 years. But now, finally, they belong to the right people. The end. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story. Bar chart final script statistics. Total word count, 11,847 words. Structure, 3 parts delivered across natural narrative breaks. CTAs included, all 3 at specified locations. Emotional beats, white heavy checkmark isolation, discovery, unraveling, vindication, transformation. Character arc, white heavy checkmark homeless / desperate courageous, vindicated secure. Mystery structure, white heavy checkmark trunk, maps, confrontation, legal battle settlement. Antagonists, white heavy checkmark hope family, realistic, motivated by greed. Supporting cast, white heavy checkmark Ranger Angela, lawyer Julia, Martha Holt, redemption arc. Vindication, white heavy checkmark financial settlement, partnership stake, memorial from Mei Lin. Transformation, white heavy checkmark homelessness to apartment, car to stability, fear to purpose. Add part 4, 10:19 a.m. Snowcap Mountain Part 4, The New Legacy, 2 years later. Sarah Chen stood in front of the classroom, facing 30 graduate students at Appalachian State University. Her lecture notes sat untouched on the podium. She didn't need them anymore. This story she knew by heart. In 1931, a Chinese immigrant woman named Maid Chen filed a mining claim on Roan Mountain. She began. She was 43 years old, spoke broken English, and had exactly $200 to her name. The men at the land office laughed at her. She clicked to the next slide, the photograph of Maid with her pickaxe, stern and defiant. 10 years later, she discovered one of the richest rare earth element deposits in the eastern United States. And 70 years after that, her great-granddaughter, living homeless in a car, used Maid hidden documentation to reclaim that fortune and establish one of the most important mining operations in North Carolina. A hand went up. Sarah nodded. Ms. Chen, how much is the operation worth now? Sarah smiled. The mining partnership is valued at approximately $180 million. Annual revenue runs between $15 to $20 million, depending on rare earth element prices. My family's 20% stake generates about $3 to $4 million per year in distributions. Murmurs rippled through the classroom. Sarah let them settle before continuing. But that's not what the story is about. The money is a result, not the point. The point is what my great-grandmother understood, that some things are worth more than immediate profit, that protection and patience can be as powerful as aggression, that the right time to claim something isn't always right now. Another hand, what happened to the Holt family? The Holts retained 80% ownership of the mining partnership. We work together now. Martha Holt retired last year. She's 84. Her daughter Rebecca runs operations. We have quarterly board meetings. We don't always agree, but we respect each other. Do you think they've changed? Really changed. Sarah considered this. I think Martha Holt spent 2 years researching what her family did to Maylin and realized she didn't want to be part of that legacy. I think she saw a chance to do something different, and I think that counts for something. She advanced to the next slide. Aerial photographs of the mining operation, showing the careful terracing, the water treatment facilities, the native vegetation restoration zones. This is what ethical extraction looks like. We employ 120 people from local communities. We restored 17 acres of previously damaged land. We fund scholarships for students from marginalized backgrounds pursuing STEM degrees. And every decision we make, we ask, would Maylin approve? How do you know what she would approve? Sarah pulled out the leather journal, worn now from constant handling, because she wrote it all down. Every value, every priority, every lesson she learned. She left me more than maps and surveys. She left me a philosophy. She opened to a page she'd marked, reading aloud. The earth gives what it has, but only to those who respect what they take. Every mineral pulled from stone should serve a purpose beyond profit. Every scar left on a mountain should be healed before you profit from what caused it. This is not weakness. This is wisdom. Sarah closed the journal. That's our operating principle. Respect what you take. Heal what you scar. Serve a purpose beyond profit. The class was quiet, absorbing this. Any other questions? A young woman in the back row raised her hand. What happened to your daughter? Is she going to take over the operation someday? Sarah's expression softened. Lily is 9 now. She's in 4th grade, doing well. And yes, she'll inherit my stake in the partnership. But whether she runs it or not, that'll be her choice. Maylin didn't get to choose. I barely got to choose. Lily will have the freedom to decide what her legacy means. After the lecture, Sarah drove to Boone Elementary to pick up Lily. Her daughter burst out of the building with 2 friends, all 3 girls laughing about something Sarah couldn't hear. Mama, can Jasmine and Emma come over? We're working on our heritage project. Sarah had heard about this project for weeks. Each student was researching their family history and creating a presentation. Lily had, predictably, chosen Maylin. Sure, I'll text their parents. The 3 girls piled into Sarah's car, a sensible Subaru Outback, nothing flashy despite the money. Sarah had learned from Maylin that wealth was a tool, not a display. At the apartment, they still rented, though Sarah was looking at houses now. The girls spread out at the dining table with poster boards and markers. "Okay," Lily announced to her friends. "So my great-great-grandmother was basically a superhero." Sarah hid her smile and went to the kitchen to make snacks. "She came from China all by herself," Lily continued, "and she found treasure in the mountains, but bad people tried to steal it. So she hid it for like 90 years until my mom found it." "How did your mom find it?" Jasmine asked. "In a trunk. It was locked in a storage place, and nobody knew what was inside. But my mom opened it, and there were maps and rocks and old letters." Emma leaned in. "Were you rich then?" "No, we were homeless. We lived in our car." Sarah's chest tightened. Lily said it so matter-of-factly, like it was just another part of the story. No shame, no trauma. Just fact. "But then the maps showed where the treasure was, and my mom went to the mountain and found it, and bad people tried to take it again, but my mom fought them and won." "Did she fight with swords?" Emma asked hopefully. "No, with lawyers, which is like fighting with words, but more boring." Sarah laughed despite herself. The girls worked for an hour, creating a poster that featured Mei Lin's photograph in the center, surrounded by hand-drawn mountains, pickaxes, and what appeared to be sparkly mineral deposits rendered in glitter glue. At the bottom, in Lily's careful handwriting, "Mei Lin Chen. She never gave up. Neither did we." That evening, after the other girls had gone home and Lily was in bed, Sarah sat at her desk reviewing documents for the next board meeting. The mining partnership was expanding. They'd identified secondary deposits on adjacent federal land and were negotiating new permits. Her phone rang. Julia Reese. "Sarah, have you seen the news?" "What news?" "Check the Asheville Citizen-Times website. Now." Sarah pulled up the site on her laptop. The headline made her breath catch. "Federal investigation into historical mining claim. Discrimination cites Chen versus Holt case as precedent." She skimmed the article. The Department of the Interior had launched a comprehensive review of mining claims filed by immigrants and people of color between 1900 to 1950. They were specifically looking at cases where claimants had been forced to abandon legitimate claims due to discrimination, harassment, or systemic bias. The Chen versus Holt settlement was being held up as a model for how such cases could be resolved. Recognition of historical wrongs, compensation for descendants, and partnership structures that honor both legal land ownership and the original claimant's rights. "This is big," Julia said. "Really big. There could be hundreds of cases like yours out there. Families who lost claims, who lost fortunes, because of racism and intimidation. And now the federal government is saying those claims deserve review." Sarah thought about Mei Lin, one woman fighting alone against a system designed to exclude her. She wasn't the only one. "No. And because you fought, because we won, other people might get justice too." After they hung up, Sarah sat quietly, processing this. Her fight hadn't just been about reclaiming Mei Lin's fortune. It had opened a door for others. She pulled out her laptop and started writing an email to the Department of the Interior, offering to share Mei Lin's documentation, to testify about their case, to help in any way she could. If there were other families out there, other descendants of people like Mei Lin who'd been cheated and erased, they deserved the same chance Sarah had gotten. They deserved to finish what their ancestors had started. 6 months later, the ceremony was held at the North Carolina Museum of History in Raleigh. Sarah stood backstage, smoothing down her dress. She still wasn't comfortable in formal wear, while Lily fidgeted with the corsage on her own dress. "Mama, why are we getting an award?" "We're not getting an award, baby. We're accepting one on behalf of great-great-grandma Mei Lin. But she's dead." "Yes, but what she did, what she accomplished, deserves to be remembered." The governor was presenting the North Carolina Heritage Award to Mei Lin Chen, posthumously, recognizing her contributions to the state's mining industry and her perseverance in the face of discrimination. Sarah and Lily would accept on her behalf. Martha Holt was in the audience. So was Julia Reese and Angela Morrison, and even Vernon Hastings, the elderly man who'd helped Sarah research land records at the courthouse 2 years ago. All the people who'd been part of the journey. The ceremony began. Sarah listened as the governor recounted Mei Lin's story. Immigrant prospector, pioneer. How she discovered valuable minerals and fought to protect them. How she'd been driven from her land but never surrendered her claim to what she'd found. And how her great-granddaughter, nearly 90 years later, had honored that claim and built something meaningful from it. "Ms. Chen," the governor said, gesturing Sarah and Lily to the stage, "would you and your daughter please come accept this award?" They walked out into the lights. The audience applauded. Sarah took the plaque, heavy bronze, with Mei Lin's name engraved on it, and stepped to the microphone. "Thank you, Governor. Thank you to everyone here." She looked down at Lily, then back at the audience. "When I inherited my great-grandmother's trunk, I was homeless and desperate. I had no idea what was inside. No idea that it would change my life and my daughter's life." She paused, gathering her thoughts. But the real inheritance wasn't the maps or the mineral samples or even the money that came later. The real inheritance was a lesson Mei Lin left behind, that you don't have to accept the injustice done to you, that you can hide what matters, protect it, and wait for the right moment to fight back. Sarah's voice strengthened. She couldn't fight her battle in 1935. The world wasn't ready. The system was too corrupt, too stacked against people who looked like her. So she did something harder. She waited. She protected what she'd found. And she trusted that someday someone in her family would be able to finish what she started. She looked directly at Martha Holt in the audience. Mei Lin's story could have been about revenge, about destroying the family that destroyed her chance at the life she'd earned. But that's not what she wanted. What she wanted was for the truth to be known, for her work to be recognized, for justice, not vengeance. Sarah held up the plaque. "This award, it's not just for Mei Lin. It's for every immigrant, every person of color, every woman who worked twice as hard and got half the credit, every person who was told they didn't belong, who built something anyway, who refused to disappear." The applause was louder now. "My daughter Lily asked me why we're accepting this award when great-great-grandma Mei Lin isn't here to receive it. And I told her, because we're the proof that she won. We're the evidence that patience and protection and faith in the future can be more powerful than immediate gratification." She knelt down so she was at Lily's level. "This plaque is going to hang in our home. And every day, when you see it, I want you to remember, you come from a woman who never gave up, who hid a fortune for 90 years rather than let the people who hurt her benefit from it, who trusted that someone, you, me, whoever came after, would have the strength she didn't have." Lily nodded seriously. Sarah stood and addressed the audience one last time. Mei Lin Chen died thinking she'd failed, died believing her work had been for nothing. But she was wrong. Everything she did mattered. Everything she protected came back to her family. And now, her legacy isn't just a mining operation. It's a precedent. It's a path forward for other families like ours. She held up the plaque again. "So on behalf of Mei Lin Chen, who never got to see this moment, who never knew how much her sacrifice would mean, thank you. Thank you for recognizing her. Thank you for honoring her. And thank you for showing that it's never too late for justice." The standing ovation lasted for 3 minutes. After the ceremony, there was a reception. Sarah found herself surrounded by people, journalists, historians, families who'd reached out after seeing the news coverage of her case. One woman, elderly and Chinese, approached with tears in her eyes. "My grandfather was a prospector in Montana," she said. "He found copper deposits in 1925. White miners drove him off the claim and killed him. My family never got any compensation. But when I saw your story, I contacted the Department of the Interior. They're reviewing his case now." Sarah took the woman's hands. "I hope they make it right. Even if they don't, even if it's too late. Knowing that someone else fought and won, that means everything." Another person approached, a young man, Native American, with documents clutched in his hand. "My great-great-grandfather had a gold claim in the Black Hills. The government invalidated it in 1923, said Native Americans couldn't hold mining claims. But I found his papers, his maps. Your case has given me hope that I can challenge that ruling." Sarah spent 2 hours talking to people, listening to their stories, offer what advice she could, and she realized something profound. Mei Lin's victory wasn't just personal. It was communal. It was opening doors that had been locked for a century. That night, back at the apartment, Sarah helped Lily hang the plaque on her bedroom wall. Lily had insisted it should be in her room, not the living room. Why did great-great-grandma have to wait so long? Lily asked as Sarah hammered the nail into the wall. Because the world wasn't ready yet. People weren't ready to admit they'd done wrong. But why did she think we'd be ready? Sarah paused. I don't think she knew we would be. I think she just hoped. She couldn't fix things herself. So she protected what she could and hoped that someday, somehow, things would be different enough that someone could finish her fight. And you did. We did. You and me together. Lily touched the plaque gently. Mama, when I'm grown up, will I have to fight too? Sarah's chest ached. I hope not, baby. I hope we're building a world where you won't have to. But if you do, if someone tries to take what's yours or tells you that you don't belong, you'll know you come from fighters. From women who didn't give up. Like you and great-great-grandma Mei Lin. Exactly like us. 1 year later, the Mei Lin Chen Scholarship Fund awarded its first grants. 10 students, all from marginalized communities, all pursuing degrees in geology, environmental science, or mining engineering. Each received $25,000 per year for 4 years, enough to cover tuition, books, and living expenses. Sarah attended the award ceremony at UNC Chapel Hill, watched as 10 young people, Black, Latino, Asian, Native American, received certificates and checks that would change their lives. One of the recipients approached her afterward, a young Chinese-American woman named Diana Liu, studying geological engineering. Miss Chen, I just want to say thank you. My parents are restaurant workers. They couldn't afford to send me to college. This scholarship, it's everything. What do you want to do with your degree? Sarah asked, I want to find deposits like your great-grandmother found, but I want to do it ethically. I want to prove that you can extract what the earth offers without destroying the earth in the process. Sarah smiled. Mei Lin would have liked you. I hope so. I'm writing my senior thesis about her, about Chinese miners in Appalachia and how they were systematically excluded from the industry, even though they were often the ones who found the most valuable deposits. If you need sources, let me know. I have boxes of documentation. Diana's eyes lit up. Really? That would be incredible. They exchanged contact information. Sarah watched the young woman walk away, energized and hopeful, and thought, this is what legacy really means. Not just money passed down, not just property or mineral rights, but opportunities created, doors opened, the next generation standing on the shoulders of those who came before and reaching higher than would have been possible alone. Present day, 3 years after the trunk. Sarah stood at the memorial site on Roan Mountain, the spot where Mei Lin's cabin had once stood. The mining partnership had restored the area, rebuilt the cabin as a historical site, and created a small museum documenting Mei Lin's life and the history of immigrant miners in Appalachia. The grand opening was today. News crews, local officials, descendants of other Chinese miners, environmental groups, students. Hundreds of people had come. Sarah's mother had flown in from California for the occasion. They'd reconnected after Sarah's story went public, healing a 20-year rift. She stood next to Sarah now, crying softly. Your grandmother, my mother, she knew about this, Sarah's mother said quietly. She knew about Mei Lin's claim. She tried to find the trunk after Mei Lin died, but it had already been put in storage and she didn't have money to pay the fees. Why didn't you tell me? Because I thought it was lost forever. I thought telling you would just be giving you false hope. She squeezed Sarah's hand. I was wrong. I should have told you. Should have helped you search. You're here now. That's what matters. The ceremony began. The governor, same one who presented the Heritage Award, cut a red ribbon stretched across the cabin's entrance. People filed in to see the exhibits. Mei Lin's tools, her journal entries blown up and mounted on walls, photographs, geological samples. At the center of the main room, in a climate control case, sat Mei Lin's trunk. Sarah had donated it to the museum with one condition, that Lily's Heritage Project post to be displayed next to it. There they were, side by side, the trunk that had held 90 years of secrets. and the glitter glue poster declaring, Mei Lin Chen. She never gave up. Neither did we. Lily stood in front of the display with her friends, explaining everything with the confidence of a child who knew her family's story mattered. And that's my mom, Lily said, pointing to Sarah. She's the one who found everything and fought the bad guys and made sure great-great-grandma's work wasn't wasted. Sarah felt Martha Holt's presence beside her. The elderly woman looked frail now, leaning on a cane, but her eyes were clear. She's proud of you, Martha said. Not just your great-grandmother. All of them. Every woman who had to hide what they built, hoping someone would find it someday. Are you okay with all this? Sarah asked. Your family's role in the story isn't flattering. Martha was quiet for a moment. My grandfather was a cruel man. My uncles were worse. They saw a Chinese woman succeeding and couldn't stand it. They destroyed her life because of their own inadequacy. She paused. That's part of my family's history. I can't change it. But I can make sure it's told honestly, and I can make sure it doesn't happen again. The partnership is the best that my family has ever done. We're making money, yes, but we're also doing it right, honoring the land, honoring the workers, honoring Mei Lin's vision. Martha smiled slightly. Rebecca says working with you keeps her honest, keeps her from making the same mistakes our ancestors made. Tell her I appreciate that. Tell her yourself. She wants to expand the scholarship fund, double the number of recipients. Sarah's throat tightened. That's generous. It's strategic. We need ethical mining engineers. Need people who understand that profit and responsibility aren't opposites. Martha looked at the exhibit. Your great-grandmother understood that. Took us 90 years to catch up. As the sun set over the mountain, Sarah found herself alone at the memorial stone she'd placed years ago. The simple granite marker had been joined by others, a full memorial garden now, with stones for other Chinese miners who'd worked these mountains. Mei Lin's stone was the largest, in the center. Sarah knelt beside it and placed fresh mountain laurel at the base, just as she did every visit. We did it, she whispered. Everything you hoped for, everything you protected. It's real now. It's making a difference. The wind moved through the trees, carrying the smell of pine and earth and the distant sound of the museum's crowd. Sarah closed her eyes and let herself imagine Mei Lin standing here. Not the old woman who died in a nursing home, but the young prospector in the photograph. Strong, defiant, holding her pickaxe like a promise. What would she think if she could see this? The museum, the scholarship fund, the ethical mining operation. The families reconnected with their own lost histories because Sarah had fought for hers. Would she be proud? Would she think it was worth the 90 years of waiting? Sarah thought she would, because Mei Lin hadn't just hidden a fortune. She'd planted a seed. And now, 3 generations later, that seed had grown into something neither of them could have imagined. A legacy that wasn't just about money or minerals or fighting injustice. All those things. It was about believing that the future could be better than the past, that patience and protection, and hope could outlast hate and greed. That one woman, working alone, refusing to surrender, could change the course of her entire family's history, and beyond her family, beyond her mountain, beyond anything she could have dreamed. Sarah stood and looked out at the valley where the mining operation hummed with careful, responsible work. Where 120 people earned good wages, extracting minerals that would power clean energy and advanced technology, where the land was respected, the workers protected, the community enriched, all because Mei Lin Chen had refused to give up, all because she'd hidden what she found and waited, all because 90 years later, a desperate homeless woman had opened a trunk and decided to fight. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from Lily. Mama, where are you? They're serving cake. Sarah smiled and typed back, Coming, baby. Save me a piece. She took one last look at Mei Lin's memorial stone, then walked back toward the museum, toward the light and noise and celebration, toward the future Mei Lin had made possible. Lily Chen stood in front of her high school class for her final presentation of freshman year. At 14, she'd inherited her great-great-grandmother's serious expression and her mother's quiet determination. My family's story starts with a trunk, she began. A locked trunk in a storage unit that my mom almost couldn't afford to keep. She clicked to the first slide, the photograph of Mei Lin with her pickaxe. This is Mei Lin Chen, my great-great-grandmother. In 1931, she did something almost impossible. She filed a mining claim as a Chinese immigrant woman in Appalachia, and when she found something valuable, powerful people tried to take it from her. Next slide, the cabin, the journal, the maps. But she was smarter than they were. She didn't fight them directly. She couldn't. The system was too corrupt. Instead, she hid everything, protected it, and waited for someone who could finish her fight. Next slide. Sarah and Lily at the trunk, the day they'd opened it. That someone was my mom. She was 32, homeless, living in a car with me. And when she found what Mei Lin had hidden, she had a choice. Take a quick payout and walk away, or fight for what her great-grandmother had earned. Lily looked directly at her classmates. She fought, even when powerful people threatened her. Even when it would have been easier to give up, she fought, because Mei Lin's story mattered. Because justice delayed isn't the same as justice denied. Because some things are worth waiting 90 years for. Final slide, the museum, the scholarship recipients, the mining operation. Today, the Mei Lin Chen Mining Partnership is one of the most ethical mining operations in North America. The Mei Lin Chen Scholarship Fund has sent 47 students to college, and the Department of the Interior has used our case to reopen 300 historical mining claim discrimination cases. She paused. My mom says the real inheritance wasn't money. It was a lesson that you don't have to accept injustice, that you can protect what matters and wait for the right moment. That patience can be as powerful as aggression. Lily clicked to a final slide. Just text a quote from Mei Lin's journal. I leave this not knowing if anyone will find it, but I leave it believing someone will. And when they do, I hope they're strong enough to finish what I couldn't, to claim what I earned, to fight battles I couldn't win. That is my real treasure. Not the minerals in the mountain, but the faith that those who come after me will be braver than I was allowed to be. She was wrong about one thing, Lily said softly. She wasn't weak. She wasn't a failure. She was the bravest person I know. Even though I never met her, she fought her battle the only way she could, by protecting what she found and trusting the future. Lily closed her laptop. And the future, my mom, me, all of us, we didn't let her down. The class was silent. Then her teacher started clapping. The other students joined in. After class, Lily texted her mom, Presentation went great. Everyone loved Mei Lin's story. Sarah replied immediately, She would be so proud of you. I know I am. Lily smiled and headed to her next class. She had her great-great-grandmother's journal in her backpack. She carried it everywhere now, the way her mom had for years. Some inheritances weren't meant to be displayed in museums. Some were meant to be carried forward, generation after generation, growing stronger with each telling. Mei Lin Chen's story had waited 90 years to be told, and now it would never be forgotten. Bar chart complete final script statistics. Total word count, 16,429 words. Structure for complete parts. All required elements. White heavy checkmark complete. Narrative arc delivered. Part 1. Isolation and discovery. Trunk, maps, daughter's hope. Part 2. Unraveling research confrontation. Evidence gathering. Part 3. Vindication, legal battle, settlement, partnership. Part 4. New legacy. Impact, scholarship, museum, multi-generational triumph. Emotional transformation. Homeless desperation, courageous fighting, financial vindication, generational legacy builder. Mei Lin's promise fulfilled. Hidden fortune, reclaimed by descendant, used ethically, benefits hundreds of families. Justice served. Historical wrong acknowledged, descendants compensated, precedent set for 300-plus similar cases. Thank you so much for letting me create this mountain woman mystery for you. Snow-capped mountain sparkles. Add part 5. For 1,000 words. 10:23 a.m. Snow-capped mountain part 5. The summit. 10 years after the trunk. The conference room on the 42nd floor of the federal building in Washington, D.C. offered a view that stretched across the Potomac. Sarah Chen stood at the window, watching planes descend toward Reagan National, and tried to calm the nervous flutter in her stomach. She was 42 now. A decade had passed since she'd opened Mei Lin's trunk in that storage unit. A decade since she'd been homeless, desperate, living in a car with Lily. Today, she was testifying before a congressional subcommittee about mining rights reform. "Ms. Chen," an aide appeared at the door. "They're ready for you." Sarah gathered her papers. Though like her university lecturers, she barely needed notes anymore. This story was carved into her bones. She followed the aide through marble hallways to the hearing room. The gallery was full. She spotted familiar faces. Julia Reese, who'd never stopped being her attorney and had become one of her closest friends. Martha Holt's daughter Rebecca, now running the mining partnership and doing it better than anyone had expected. Diana Liu, the scholarship recipient who'd written her thesis on Mei Lin and was now a junior professor at Colorado School of Mines. And in the front row, Lily, 19 years old now, a sophomore at Stanford studying environmental engineering and geology. She gave Sarah a small wave and a confident smile. Sarah took her seat at the witness table. The subcommittee chairman, Senator Williams from Montana, gavelled the hearing to order. "Ms. Chen, thank you for being here today. Your family's case has become central to the discussion about historical mining claim discrimination. Can you start by summarizing what happened to your great-grandmother, Mei Lin Chen?" Sarah leaned toward the microphone. "Senator, in 1931, my great-grandmother filed a legitimate mining claim on Roan Mountain, North Carolina. She was a Chinese immigrant, 43 years old, working alone. Over 4 years, she discovered and documented one of the richest rare earth element deposits in Appalachia, worth millions even by 1935 standards." She paused, letting that sink in. But the white families who control that region couldn't accept a Chinese woman, succeeding where they'd failed. They harassed her, sabotaged her equipment, threatened her. And when she went to local authorities for help, those authorities looked the other way. They were friends with her harassers. Some were on the harassers' payroll. Senator Williams nodded. And what happened to her claim? She was forced to abandon it in 1935. She stopped paying property taxes because she couldn't safely return to the land. In 1943, the property was sold at a tax auction for $200, less than half what she'd originally paid. The same family that drove her off bought it, and they held that land for how long? 80 years. They held it until 2027, when I discovered my great-grandmother's hidden documentation and filed suit to reclaim the mining rights. Another senator, Rodriguez from New Mexico, leaned forward. "Ms. Chen, we've heard testimony that your case is unusual, that most families don't have the kind of documentation your great-grandmother preserved. How do you respond to arguments that your settlement can't be a model for other cases?" Sarah had been expecting this question. "Senator, my great-grandmother's documentation was extraordinary, yes, but it existed because she knew she was being wronged, and she knew no one would believe her without proof. She kept journals. She saved every receipt, every survey, every assay report. She photographed her work." Sarah pulled out a folder. "But she's not the only one who did this. Since our case became public, the Department of the Interior has received documentation from 347 families. Letters, photographs, claim filings, court records. Evidence of systematic discrimination against Chinese, Japanese, Mexican, and Native American miners across the West and Appalachia." She slid the folder across the table. "These families have proof. They just didn't know anyone would listen until they saw that someone listened to me." Senator Rodriguez examined the folder. "And what are you proposing we do?" "I'm proposing the Historical Mining Claims Justice Act. It would create a federal review process for mining claims abandoned between 1900 and 1960 due to documented discrimination. Not just racial discrimination, gender discrimination, too. Women miners face the same treatment Mei Lin did." Senator Williams looked skeptical. "Ms. Chen, we're talking about claims that are 70, 80, even 100 years old. The people who filed them are dead. The people who wronged them are dead. At what point do we say the past is the past? Sarah met his eyes. Senator, respectfully, the past isn't past when its consequences are still being felt. The families who drove Mei Lin off her land, they profited from that land for 80 years. Their children inherited wealth built on stolen opportunity. Meanwhile, Mei Lin's descendants, my mother, me, my daughter, we got nothing. We were poor for generations because of what was taken from her. She leaned forward. Justice delayed is still justice. And if we say it's been too long, we're telling every family that was wronged, your suffering doesn't matter. Your ancestors' work doesn't matter. The theft of their future doesn't matter. I don't accept that. And I don't think the American people accept it either. The hearing room was silent. Senator Williams cleared his throat. What would this review process look like? Julia Reese stood at Sarah's signal. Senator, if I may, I'm Julia Reese, Ms. Chen's attorney. We've drafted proposed legislation. She distributed copies to the committee. The review process would be administered by the Department of the Interior. Families would submit documentation proving 1. That a legitimate mining claim was filed. 2. That the claimant was prevented from maintaining the claim due to discrimination. And 3. That the claim was subsequently lost through tax sale, fraudulent transfer, or abandonment under duress. And if a claim meets those criteria, Rodriguez asked, several possible remedies. First, financial compensation to descendants based on estimated value of the lost claim. Second, restoration of mining rights if the minerals haven't been extracted, similar to what happened in Ms. Chen's case. Third, partnership arrangements with current landowners. Fourth, transfer of royalties from active mining operations on formerly claimed land. Senator Williams frowned. That sounds expensive. It is, Julia agreed. We estimate the total cost could reach $2 to $3 billion over 10 years. But, Senator, the mining industry has extracted trillions of dollars in value from American land over the past century. Spending a fraction of that to remedy historical wrongs isn't just justice, it's investment. These families will spend that money in their communities. They'll create businesses, fund education, build generational wealth that was stolen from them. Rebecca Holt stood. Senator Williams, if I may, I'm Rebecca Holt, current CEO of the Chen Holt Mining Partnership. Williams looked surprised. You're from the family that drove Mei Lin Chen from her land. Yes, sir. Rebecca's voice was steady. My great-grandfather and his brothers did terrible things. They used their power and privilege to destroy a woman who threatened their sense of superiority. And my family benefited from that injustice for 3 generations. She gestured to Sarah. When Ms. Chen came forward with her great-grandmother's documentation, my family had a choice. We could fight her in court, deny everything, use our money and lawyers to crush her the way our ancestors had crushed Mei Lin, or we could face the truth and try to do better. You chose partnership, Rodriguez observed. We did, and it's been the best decision my family ever made. The Chen Holt Mining Partnership is more profitable than any of our previous operations. It has a better safety record, better environmental compliance, better community relationships. Why? Because Sarah holds us accountable. Because we can't take shortcuts or ignore impacts when we have a partner who cares more about doing it right than doing it fast. Rebecca met Williams' eyes. Remedying historical injustice isn't just moral, it's practical. It makes us better, makes the industry better, and it begins to heal wounds that have festered for generations. The hearing lasted 4 hours. When it finally adjourned, Sarah was exhausted but cautiously hopeful. The committee hadn't committed to anything, but they'd listened, really listened. In the hallway outside, she was mobbed by reporters. Ms. Chen, do you think the bill will pass? Do you have support from the mining industry? What about critics who say this is just wealth redistribution? Sarah raised a hand. I'll make a brief statement. The Historical Mining Claims Justice Act isn't about punishing anyone. It's not about revenge or redistribution. It's about recognition, about saying that what happened to Mei Lin Chen and hundreds of families like hers was wrong, and about making that wrong as right as we can this late in history. She paused. My great-grandmother died thinking she'd failed, died believing her work had been for nothing. But it wasn't for nothing. Everything she protected, everything she documented, it came back to her family, and now it's helping other families find justice too. That's what this bill is about. Finishing what people like Maylin started. What do you say to those who claim you're only doing this because you already got your settlement? Sarah smiled slightly. I say they're right. I am fortunate. My daughter will never know the poverty I knew, the poverty my mother knew, the poverty Maylin knew. We're secure now, but that security came from one thing, Maylin's extraordinary documentation. Most families don't have that. They have fragments, pieces, enough to know they were wrong, but not enough to prove it in court. This bill would give them a path forward anyway. Another reporter. Will you profit from this bill? No. My family's case is settled. This bill doesn't affect us at all. I'm doing this because it's right. Lily appeared at her elbow, gently extracting her from the crowd. Mom, you have dinner with Senator Rodriguez in an hour. We need to go. They escaped to a quiet corner of the building. Lily handed Sarah a bottle of water. You were amazing in there, Lily said. I was nervous. Didn't show. Lily's expression turned serious. Mom, I've been thinking about my thesis project. Sarah drank water and waited. Lily was in her second year at Stanford, already making waves with her research on ethical mining practices. I want to track down the families. The 347 families who submitted documentation to the Department of the Interior. I want to interview them, document their stories, create an oral history archive. That's ambitious. It's important. Right now, they're just names on paper, claims in a database. But they're people. They have stories like Maylin's. And those stories deserve to be told. Sarah studied her daughter. Lily had grown up with privilege. The privilege Sarah's fight had secured, but she hadn't grown up soft. She understood that what they had came from struggle, came from a woman who'd worked alone in the mountains 90 years ago and refused to surrender. You'll need funding, resources, time. The scholarship fund could sponsor it, or I could apply for grants. But Mom, Lily's voice caught, I want to do this while some of the second-generation descendants are still alive, while there are still people who remember hearing these stories from their grandparents. In another 10 years, that connection will be gone. Then we better move fast. 6 months later, Lily's oral history project grew faster than anyone expected. News outlets covered it. Other universities wanted to collaborate. The Smithsonian offered to house the archive. Lily traveled across the country, Nevada, Montana, Colorado, Arizona, interviewing families. Each one had a story like Maylin's. A grandfather who'd found gold, but lost his claim to white miners who threatened him. A grandmother who discovered copper, but been denied the right to file because women couldn't hold claims in that jurisdiction. A great-uncle who'd worked a silver vein for 5 years, only to have the land seized by the government under eminent domain, then immediately leased to a white-owned mining company. Stories of theft, intimidation, systematic exclusion. And in every case, families who've been poor for generations while others profited from what their ancestors have found. Sarah watched the archive grow, watched Lily document injustice after injustice, and felt something she hadn't expected, rage. She'd spent 10 years being measured, diplomatic, willing to compromise and negotiate. But seeing the scale of what had been done, not just to Maylin, but to hundreds of families, the careful theft of futures, the systematic erasure of accomplishment, it lit something fierce in her chest. The Historical Mining Claims Justice Act was stalled in committee. Industry lobbyists were fighting it. Conservative senators were calling it reparations by another name and blocking hearings. Sarah decided she was done being polite. She started writing op-eds. Not carefully worded pieces designed to avoid offense, but angry, pointed essays about theft and injustice. One piece in the New York Times was titled, The Polite Theft of the American Dream. We talk about the American dream as if it's available to everyone who works hard enough. But what happens when you work hard, find something valuable, and have it stolen because of your race or gender? What happens when a system designed to protect property rights protects only certain people's property? My great-grandmother, Chen, worked harder than any person I've known. She found a fortune. And she lost it not because she failed, but because powerful people decided she didn't deserve to succeed. For 90 years, we called that unfortunate. We called it the way things were. We said, it's too bad, but what can you do? I'm saying we can do better. We can acknowledge the theft. We can compensate the descendants. We can stop pretending that historical injustice has no modern consequences. Or we can keep lying to ourselves about the American dream, while denying it to the very people who work hardest to achieve it. The piece went viral. So did the backlash. Sarah's social media filled with hate. People calling her a grifter, an opportunist, someone exploiting her great-grandmother's story for personal gain. One particularly vicious Twitter thread claimed Sarah had fabricated Mayd's documentation, that the trunk was a hoax, that she bribed officials to settle her case. Julia wanted to sue for defamation. Sarah said no. Let them talk. Let them show who they are. But it wore on her. The constant attacks, the accusations, the way people twisted her family story into something ugly. Lily noticed. Of course she noticed. Mom, you should take a break from social media. From all of it. I can't. The bill needs support. People need to understand. People who are going to understand already understand. The people attacking you, they're not going to change their minds because you write another op-ed. Sarah knew Lily was right, but she couldn't stop. Couldn't rest while families were still waiting for justice. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A documentary filmmaker named James Park had been following Sarah's story for 2 years. His film Hidden Claims, the theft of Asian American mining fortunes, premiered at Sundance and won the Audience Award. The film wasn't just about Mayd. It covered a dozen families, all with stories of discovery and dispossession. It showed the documentation, claim filings, harassment records, court cases thrown out on racial grounds. And it showed the modern descendants, many still poor, while the families who'd stolen from their ancestors lived in comfort. The final scene was Sarah testifying at the congressional hearing, intercut with footage of Mayd's cabin memorial and Lily interviewing other descendant families. It ended with a simple title card. The Historical Mining Claims Justice Act remains stalled in committee. 347 families remain waiting for acknowledgement. How much longer? The film became a phenomenon. Streaming numbers broke records. Social media conversations shifted. Suddenly, blocking the bill wasn't a defensive stance. It was indefensible. Within 2 months, the committee scheduled a vote. Sarah stood in the Senate gallery the day the bill came to the floor. Lily beside her. Julia on her other side. Rebecca Holt flew in from North Carolina. Diana Lou came from Colorado. Martha Holt, now 91 and frail, insisted on attending despite her doctor's warnings. The debate lasted 6 hours. Passionate arguments on both sides. Opponents called it historical revisionism and racial preference. Supporters called it overdue justice and basic decency. When the vote finally came, Sarah held her breath. 54 to 46 in favor. The Historical Mining Claims Justice Act passed. The gallery erupted in applause. Sarah found herself crying, Lily hugging her, Julia shaking her shoulders in triumph. It wasn't a dream. It was real. Mayd's story, her 90-year wait for justice, had changed federal law. 2 years later, 12 years after the trunk, the first wave of settlements under the Historical Mining Claims Justice Act paid out $847 million to 312 families. Sarah attended as many of the ceremonies as she could, watched families receive checks that would change their lives, watched elderly people cry, saying they never thought they'd see this day. In Phoenix, she met the granddaughter of a Mexican miner who discovered turquoise deposits in 1924 and been driven off by armed white miners. The settlement was $2.3 million. My grandmother told me the stories, the woman said, tears streaming. But I thought they were just stories. I didn't know she'd actually found anything. Didn't know we'd been robbed. Now you know, Sarah said, and your grandchildren will know. That's what matters. In Butte, Montana, she met the great-grandson of a Chinese miner who'd found copper in 1908. The settlement was smaller, $400,000, but the man was overjoyed. My family has been poor for 4 generations. This changes everything. My kids can go to college now. Real college, not community college we can barely afford, because of what my great-grandfather found 115 years ago. Story after story, family after family. Some settlements were larger. One family received $12 million for gold deposits their great-great-grandfather had discovered and lost. Others were smaller, but every one mattered. And Sarah realized something. Maylin's legacy wasn't just her family's fortune. It was this, all of this. Hundreds of families finding justice because one woman had refused to give up, and her great-granddaughter had refused to stay silent. Present day, 15 years after the trunk. Sarah stood at the summit of Roan Mountain, the highest point accessible by trail. Lily hiked beside her, both of them breathing hard from the climb. They'd come here every year on the anniversary of finding the trunk. It had become their tradition. Hike to the summit, sit quietly, remember Maylin. This year was different, though. This year, they weren't alone. Gathered at the summit were representatives from 97 of the families who'd received settlements under the Historical Mining Claims Justice Act. They'd organized this themselves, reaching out to the Oral History Archive, planning the gathering as a way to honor the woman whose fight had made their justice possible. An elderly Japanese-American woman approached Sarah. "Ms. Chen, I'm Hana Kimura. My grandfather lost his claim in 1942 when our family was sent to internment camps. By the time we were released, white miners had taken over his discovery. We never recovered." She held out a photograph. A young man standing by a mining sluice, smiling despite the hard work. "This is him, Kenji Kimura. Your great-grandmother never met him, but her fight saved his legacy. Our family received $1.8 million last year. My grandchildren will have opportunities he never dreamed of because you didn't give up." Sarah took the photograph carefully. "Tell me about him." For the next hour, families shared stories, not just of what was stolen, but of who their ancestors were. Miners, prospectors, dreamers, people who'd worked impossible claims in impossible conditions and found value where others said there was none. People like Maylin. As the sun began to set, painting the mountains gold and purple, Sarah stood before the group. "My great-grandmother died in 2024 in a nursing home in Asheville. She was 98 years old. She'd lived most of her life thinking she'd failed, that everything she'd worked for, everything she'd found, had been for nothing." Sarah's voice caught, but she was wrong. Everything she did mattered. The documentation she saved, the journal she kept, the patience she showed. It all mattered, not just for me and Lily, for all of you, for your families, for justice that seemed impossible. She pulled out Maylin's journal. She still carried it everywhere. In her final entry, she wrote, "I am leaving this world without seeing my work acknowledged, but I leave believing someone, someday, will find what I protected. And when they do, I hope they're strong enough to fight battles I couldn't win." Sarah looked at the gathered faces. We fought those battles. All of us. And we won. Not just money. Not just settlements. We won acknowledgement. We won recognition that what was done to our families was wrong. We won the right to say, our ancestors deserve better, and we're making sure their stories aren't forgotten. The crowd was silent, except for the wind through the mountain pines. Chen never got to see this moment. Never knew that her 90-year wait would result in federal law changes. Never knew that her decision to hide rather than surrender would inspire hundreds of families to come forward with their own stories. Sarah held up the journal, but I think she believed it was possible. Believed that patience and protection could be more powerful than immediate gratification. That justice delayed isn't justice denied if someone is brave enough to keep fighting. She closed the journal. She was right. And I'm grateful, we're all grateful, that she never gave up, that she hid what mattered and waited for us to be strong enough to claim it. Lily stepped forward and placed a wreath of mountain laurel at the summit marker, the traditional flower Sarah always brought to Maylin's memorial. One by one, the other families came forward. Each placed a stone from their ancestors' mining claim, creating a cairn at the summit. Stones from Montana, Nevada, Arizona, Colorado, California, Oregon. Stones that represented gold, silver, copper, turquoise, rare earth elements. Stones that had been the beginning of dreams and the source of theft. Now, gathered together, they represented something else: memory, acknowledgement, justice. As darkness fell, someone lit a candle. Then another. Soon 97 candles flickered in the mountain darkness, one for each family present. Sarah stood with Lily, watching the lights, and felt something she'd been carrying for 15 years finally release. The weight of Mei Lin's weight. The burden of fighting for justice. The fear that it wouldn't be enough. That the story would be forgotten. That the struggle would have been for nothing. It hadn't been for nothing. Mei Lin's 90-year wait had ended in triumph. Not just personal triumph, but communal victory. Not just one family's justice, but hundreds. And standing on that summit, surrounded by the descendant of miners who'd waited just as long, Sarah understood the true magnitude of what her great-grandmother had done. Mei Lin hadn't just hidden a fortune. She'd planted hope, and hope, protected and nurtured across generations, had grown into something extraordinary, something that couldn't be stolen or suppressed or forgotten, something eternal. Lily Chen stood at the podium in the Stanford Auditorium, defending her doctoral dissertation. At 26, she completed her PhD in geological engineering with a focus on ethical extraction practices and historical mining justice. Her dissertation title, Protected Fortunes: How Documentation and Patience Created Pathways to Historical Mining Justice. The committee chair smiled. Dr. Chen, your research covers 423 mining claim cases from 1900 to 1960. What patterns did you identify? Lily clicked to her first slide, a graph showing claim locations, demographics, and outcomes. The pattern is clear. Miners from marginalized groups, Chinese, Japanese, Mexican, Native American, and women of all races, consistently found valuable deposits at rates equal to or higher than white male miners. But their claims were invalidated, stolen, or forcibly abandoned at rates 400% higher. She advanced the slide. And in almost every case where families retained detailed documentation, they were eventually able to secure some form of justice or compensation. The cases that failed, almost all lacked adequate documentation. What's your conclusion? That my great-great-grandmother, Mei Lin Chen, understood something fundamental. In a corrupt system, truth requires evidence, and evidence, protected long enough, will eventually be heard. The committee conferred briefly, then the chair stood. Congratulations, Dr. Chen. Your dissertation is approved with distinction. That evening, Lily called her mother. I passed. They approved it. Sarah's voice came through the phone, thick with emotion. Mei Lin would be so proud. So am I. Mom, I've been offered position. Colorado School of Mines. They're creating a new department, Historical Mining Justice and Ethical Practices. They want me to chair it. Are you going to accept? I think so. It feels right. Continuing what you started, what Mei Lin started. It's what we do, Sarah said softly. Our family. We finish what others started, and we start what others will finish. Lily looked at the photograph on her desk, Mei Lin with her pickaxe, Sarah with the trunk, and Lily herself at the mountain summit ceremony. 3 generations, 3 women, 1 unbroken line of refusal to surrender. I love you, Mom. I love you too, baby. Now go celebrate. You earned this. After they hung up, Lily walked to her bookshelf and pulled down Mei Lin's journal. Sarah had given it to her when she started her PhD. She opened to the last page, where Mei Lin had written her final words in 1935. And beneath that, in Sarah's handwriting from 2027, we found it. We fought for it. We won. Thank you for waiting for us. And now, in Lily's hand, she added, and we're making sure no one ever has to wait this long again. Your patience changed the world. We won't forget. She closed the journal and placed it back on the shelf. Tomorrow, she would start building the department that would train the next generation of ethical mining engineers. Tomorrow, she would continue fighting for families still waiting for justice. Tomorrow, She would carry Mei Lin's legacy forward into new battles, new challenges, new mountains to climb. But tonight, she simply stood at her window, looking out at the California hills, and thought about a woman she'd never met. A woman who'd worked alone in the Appalachian Mountains 90 years ago. A woman who refused to surrender, who'd hidden what mattered, who believed, against all evidence, that someday someone would finish her fight. Mei Lin Chen had been right, and her descendants would make sure the world never forgot it.